Admiral Zexthak stood before the massive holographic display, showing the third planet of the Sol system. The blue marble hung suspended in the void, completely unaware of the armada that had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of its solar system. 9,900 warships of the Galactic Hegemony surrounded Earth like a metallic storm cloud, their hulls gleaming with the promise of destruction. "Such a small world to cause so much trouble," muttered Commander Veltar, his 6 eyes focusing on different tactical displays simultaneously. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and never before had a single planet required such overwhelming force to subdue. Zexthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or annoyance. The humans had been discovered only 50 Earth years ago, a primitive species that had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. Their technology was laughably simple, their weapons crude chemical propulsion systems that could barely scratch the hull of a hegemony scout ship. Yet somehow these backward creatures had managed to humiliate the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. It started with the first contact incident. The hegemony had sent a standard diplomatic vessel to establish communications and assess the species for potential membership or servitude. The humans had responded by destroying the ship with something they called a nuclear weapon, not just damaged it, not just forced it to retreat, but completely vaporized a vessel that could have conquered most star systems single-handedly. The second incident was worse. A full battle squadron had been dispatched to establish order and demonstrate hegemony superiority. The humans met them at the edge of their system with a ragtag fleet of converted mining vessels and primitive warships. The battle should have lasted minutes. Instead, it dragged on for 3 days, and when the hegemony fleet finally retreated, they had lost nearly half their ships to humans wielding weapons made of steel and burning chemical fuel. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet," reported Communications Officer Priltex, her scales shifting to a nervous purple coloration. "Put it through," Zexthak ordered, straightening his imposing frame. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human. The creature was pale-skinned with strange fiber growing from its head, wearing what appeared to be formal attire despite the circumstances. Behind it, other humans moved with purpose, their eyes showing neither fear nor submission. "I am Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, its voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. "I assume you're here about our previous disagreements with your people." Zexthak felt his throat sacs inflate. With barely contained rage, disagreements, this primitive creature called the destruction of hegemony vessels disagreements. "I am Admiral Zexthak of the Galactic Hegemony. You will surrender unconditionally, or we will reduce your planet to ash and vapor." The human called Chen showed no visible reaction to the threat. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral. We've had time to prepare since your last visit, and we don't surrender. It's not in our nature. You face nearly 10,000 warships, creature. Your entire species numbers less than 12 billion. We have faced and conquered civilizations spanning hundreds of worlds. What could you possibly have prepared that would matter against such overwhelming force?" Chen's mouth curved upward in what the translation matrix identified as a smile, though it seemed to carry no warmth or humor. "Admiral, you've made the same mistake every invader in our history has made. You assume that because we're outnumbered, we're defeated. You assume that because our technology seems primitive, we're helpless. And most importantly, you assume that because you've conquered other species easily, you'll conquer us the same way. Your confidence will not save you," Zexthak growled, his patience wearing thin. "We have weapons that can crack planets, shields that can withstand the fury of stars. Your chemical rockets and crude missiles are toys compared to our might. You know what our ancestors used to say, Admiral? They said that humans are most dangerous when they're cornered. And right now, with your fleet surrounding our only world, you've cornered the entire human race." Chen leaned forward slightly. "We've been preparing for this moment for 50 years. Every man, woman, and child on this planet knows what's at stake. We've turned our entire world into a fortress. And we've learned some very interesting things about physics that I don't think your people have considered." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge of the flagship in tense silence. Zexthak stared at the blue world below, feeling an uncomfortable sensation he hadn't experienced in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it as uncertainty. "Sir, our deep scans are detecting massive energy signatures across the planet's surface," reported Tactical Officer Morkston. "They appear to be focusing some kind of planetary defense grid. I've never seen anything like it. Impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours. What could they possibly have built that our sensors would even register? Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions beginning to form around the planet. And, sir, those energy signatures are growing exponentially. Zexthak felt his blood turn cold. Gravitational manipulation required technology that even the hegemony had only recently mastered. These humans couldn't possibly have advanced that far in just 50 years. Could they? All ships prepare for bombardment, he ordered. We end this quickly, before they can activate whatever primitive defense system they've cobbled together. But as the first wave of hegemony dreadnoughts moved into bombardment formation, space around Earth began to twist and bend in ways that defied conventional physics. Energy readings spiked to levels that made the ship's sensors scream warnings, and for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zexthak wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had indeed been preparing, and they were about to demonstrate why their species had earned a reputation for adaptability and ruthlessness that would echo across the galaxy for millennia to come. The hegemony was about to learn that some species simply refused to be conquered, no matter the odds. The first bombardment began at 1430 Earth Standard Time. 300 hegemony dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize continents. Plasma beams that could vaporize mountains streaked toward Earth's surface, followed by antimatter torpedoes capable of creating artificial suns. None of them reached their targets. The gravitational distortions around Earth had intensified into something that made seasoned hegemony officers question their understanding of physics. The planet appeared to be wrapped in layers of twisted space-time, creating a defensive barrier unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Plasma beams bent and curved back on themselves. Antimatter weapons simply vanished into dimensional folds, and kinetic projectiles found themselves trapped in temporal loops. What in the void of space is that? Commander Veltar whispered, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief as he watched their most powerful weapons rendered completely useless. Admiral Zexthak gripped the command rail until his claws left marks in the metal. Impossible. Gravitational shields of this magnitude would require the combined power output of a dozen stars. These primitives can't possibly have harnessed that kind of energy. Sir, we're receiving telemetry from the bombardment fleet, reported Tactical Officer Morkston, his voice trembling. They report that their targeting systems are being affected by some kind of spatial interference. Weapons fire is being redirected, absorbed, or simply disappearing entirely. On the surface of Earth, in a bunker buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the orbital display with grim satisfaction. The daughter of the Secretary General had spent the last 30 years working on humanity's ultimate defense project, and now it was time to see if her theories about weaponized mathematics could save the human race. Gravitational lensing is holding steady, reported her assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka. The fold generators are operating at 97% efficiency. We're literally bending space around the entire planet. Good, Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that would have seemed like magic to the aliens above. Initiate Phase 2. Time to show them what happens when you corner a species that split the atom before they left their home planet. Across Earth's surface, massive installations that had been disguised as industrial complexes suddenly came to life. Humanity had learned much from captured hegemony technology over the past 50 years, but more importantly, they had applied their own unique approach to problem solving. While the galactic civilizations had developed their technology through gradual evolution over millennia, humans had compressed thousands of years of advancement into mere decades through sheer desperation and ingenuity. The humans had done something that no other species in galactic history had attempted. They had weaponized their planet's magnetic field. Sir, massive energy spikes are being detected across the planet's surface, Morkston called out, his voice rising in panic. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing power directly from their planet's core. Admiral Zexthak felt his throat sacs constrict. Impossible. No species has ever been insane enough to tap directly into planetary magnetic fields. The risk of destabilizing the entire world. Sir, incoming transmission from the planet. The main screen flickered again, showing Secretary General Chen standing in what appeared to be the same room as before. But now behind him, Banks of alien technology hummed with barely contained power, jury-rigged together with human engineering in ways that made experienced hegemony scientists want to flee in terror. Admiral Zexthak, Chen said calmly. I thought you might want to see what we've been working on. You were right about one thing. Our chemical rockets and primitive missiles wouldn't be much use against your fleet. So we built something else entirely. You're bluffing, Zexthak growled. Your species doesn't have the knowledge to construct gravitational shields. Chen's smile returned, colder than before. We didn't have the knowledge, but your people were kind enough to leave behind some very interesting wreckage after our previous encounters. We're quick learners, Admiral. It's one of our defining characteristics. Behind Chen, human technicians worked alongside machinery that combined hegemony gravity manipulation technology with human innovation in ways that violated several laws of physics. The result was a planetary defense system that turned Earth itself into a weapon. You see, Admiral, while your people were conquering primitive civilizations for 10,000 years, they grew complacent. You assumed that superior technology automatically meant superior intelligence. But technology is just tools, and humans have always been very, very good with tools. The transmission shifted to show external views of Earth from monitoring satellites. The planet was no longer the familiar blue marble. It was surrounded by layers of twisted space-time that created rainbow aurora effects across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The gravitational lensing was so intense that it was actually bending light from distant stars. We've essentially turned our entire planet into a gravity well generator, Chen explained conversationally. The magnetic field provides the power source, and we've used your own technology to focus it into something rather special. Would you like a demonstration? Without waiting for an answer, Chen gestured to one of his technicians. Suddenly, 50 hegemony ships on the outer edge of the formation found themselves caught in a localized gravity well that hadn't existed a moment before. The warships, each massing millions of tons, were yanked from their positions and hurled toward Earth at tremendous velocity. But instead of impacting the planet, they were caught in the gravitational lensing field and began to orbit Earth in impossible trajectories, trapped like insects in amber made of curved spacetime. As you can see, Chen continued, we've given your physics a rather creative interpretation. Those ships aren't destroyed, Admiral. They're just experiencing time a bit differently now. From their perspective, they'll orbit our planet for approximately 10,000 years. From ours, they'll serve as a nice addition to our defensive perimeter. The bridge of Admiral Zexthak's flagship fell completely silent, except for the hum of life support systems. 9,800 hegemony warships faced a single planet defended by creatures who had turned mathematics into a weapon and physics into a tool of war. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galactic hegemony faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated through superior firepower. The humans had changed the rules of the game entirely. The Hegemony War Council convened aboard Admiral Zexthak's flagship 3 hours after the demonstration. Representatives from all major member species gathered in the massive conference chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, growls, and telepathic static. The holographic display at the center of the room showed Earth surrounded by its impossible defensive grid, with the 50 captured ships still visible as they traced their eternal orbits around the human world. This is unprecedented, declared War Master Crixtel of the Zentaurian Imperium, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's lighting into harsh rainbows. In 12,000 years of galactic warfare, no species has ever turned their own planet into a weapon. Admiral Zexthak's mandibles clicked irritably. The humans have violated every conventional understanding of planetary defense. They've somehow managed to harness gravitational forces that should require the combined output of multiple star systems. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly, suggested Counselor Mordak, the hegemony's chief strategist. Her serpentine form coiled thoughtfully as she accessed tactical databases. Every species we've encountered has followed predictable patterns of technological development. The humans appear to be following no pattern at all. Fleet Commander Tixler, whose species had been among the first conquered by the hegemony millennia ago, leaned forward on his mechanical appendages. Our intelligence reports indicate that human technology advancement has been exponential rather than gradual. They've compressed what should be thousands of years of development into mere decades. Impossible. scoffed General Vexane of the Hegemony Marines. Technological advancement requires time for proper integration, testing, and refinement. No species can skip those steps without catastrophic failure. And yet, Admiral Zexthak said grimly, they have done exactly that. The question becomes, how do we proceed against an enemy that doesn't follow established patterns? The council chamber fell silent as each representative contemplated the unprecedented situation. The galactic hegemony had conquered thousands of worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. Their standard doctrine involved orbital bombardment, followed by ground invasion, a strategy that had never failed. But the humans had made orbital bombardment impossible and ground invasion unnecessary by turning their entire planet into an impenetrable fortress. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Mordak slowly, we should consider negotiation. The suggestion sparked immediate outrage from the military representatives. General Vexane's forearms gestured violently. Negotiation? With primitives who have dared to resist the hegemony? We have nearly 10,000 warships. We will find a way to break their defenses. Will we? War Master Crixtel's crystalline voice carried an edge of doubt. Our preliminary analysis suggests that their gravitational manipulation technology could theoretically be scaled up further. If they can trap 50 ships in temporal distortion fields, what prevents them from trapping our entire fleet? Admiral Zexthak activated the tactical display, showing detailed sensor readings from the trapped ships. Our scientists estimate that the crews aboard those vessels are experiencing time at roughly 1/10,000th normal rate. They're effectively frozen in time while maintaining just enough temporal flow to remain conscious. It's a fate arguably worse than death. Fleet Commander Tixler's optical sensors focused on the data. The precision required for such manipulation suggests an understanding of space-time mechanics that surpasses our own. These humans have accomplished in 50 years what our greatest scientists haven't achieved in millennia. There's something else, Admiral Zexthak continued, his voice growing heavier. Intelligence reports from our deep space monitors indicate that the humans have been broadcasting detailed information about our fleet deployment, weapon capabilities, and tactical doctrines across the galaxy. They're not trying to hide their resistance. They're advertising it. The implications of this revelation sent ripples of unease through the council. For 10,000 years, the hegemony had maintained control through fear and the perception of invincibility. If word spread that a single primitive planet had successfully defied their greatest armada, it could inspire rebellion across hundreds of worlds. We cannot allow this defiance to continue, General Vexane declared. Every day we delay gives other species time to develop similar defensive capabilities. We must act decisively. Counselor Mordak's serpentine form shifted nervously. But how? Traditional weapons are useless against their gravitational shields. Our boarding craft cannot penetrate the distortion fields. Ground assault is impossible when we cannot reach the planet's surface. Admiral Zexthak studied the tactical display for long moments before speaking. There is one option we haven't considered. The humans' defense system, as impressive as it is, must have limitations. They're drawing power directly from their planet's magnetic field, which means they're essentially strip mining their own world's life support systems. War Master Crixtel's crystalline structure brightened with interest. You suggest we wait for their system to fail? More than that, the Admiral replied grimly. We force them to maintain maximum defensive output until their planet's magnetic field collapses entirely. Without that field, their world becomes uninhabitable. They'll face a choice, surrender or watch their planet die slowly. A siege, Fleet Commander Tixler observed. We maintain position and force them to burn through their planet's resources, defending against continuous attacks. Precisely. We can afford to wait. They cannot. Admiral Zexthak's mandibles clicked with renewed confidence. No species has ever been willing to sacrifice their homeworld for the sake of resistance. When faced with extinction, even humans will see reason. But even as the hegemony leadership planned their siege strategy, none of them understood the fundamental miscalculation they were making. They assumed that humans, like every other species they had encountered, would prioritize survival over principles. They couldn't conceive of a species that would rather fight to the death than accept subjugation. The humans had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, and their preparations went far beyond defensive technology. They had fundamentally altered their entire civilization around a single principle. Never again would humanity bow to any master except their own chosen leaders. Every human on Earth understood that surrender meant slavery for their children and their children's children. The hegemony was about to discover that some species cannot be broken, no matter the cost. The siege began on Earth day 127 of the occupation. Admiral Zexthak implemented a strategy of constant pressure, rotating his fleet in continuous waves of bombardment attempts designed to force the humans to maintain their gravitational defenses at maximum power. Sophisticated hegemony calculations predicted that the planet's magnetic field would be depleted within 6 months, forcing surrender or planetary extinction. The humans had other plans. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the central command bunker, watching displays that showed the hegemony fleet's predictable rotation patterns. Around her, teams of human engineers worked alongside captured alien technology, making modifications that would have terrified any sane scientist in the galaxy. The humans weren't just defending their planet anymore. They were turning it into something unprecedented in galactic history. Magnetic field depletion is proceeding exactly as projected, reported Dr. Tanaka, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. We've got maybe 4 months before the defensive grid becomes unsustainable. Perfect, Sarah replied, causing several nearby technicians to look at her with concern. Initiate Project Dandelion. Across Earth's surface, installations that had remained hidden since the beginning of the siege suddenly activated. These weren't defensive systems or weapons in any conventional sense. They were something far more dangerous to the established galactic order: transmitters. For the past 4 months, while maintaining their gravitational defenses, the humans had been constructing the most powerful communication array ever built, using principles derived from their gravity manipulation technology. They had created a broadcast system capable of reaching every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously. Beginning transmission, announced Communications Director Martinez from his station. All frequencies, all languages, maximum power. The message that went out to the galaxy was simple, direct, and revolutionary. It contained complete technical specifications for basic gravity manipulation technology, detailed instructions for planetary defense systems, and, most importantly, proof that the galactic hegemony could be successfully resisted. Secretary General Chen's image appeared on billions of screens across thousands of worlds as the transmission reached every corner of galactic civilization. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, his voice carrying clearly through universal translators. For 10,000 years you have lived under the rule of the hegemony, told that resistance is futile and that their technology is unbeatable. Today we prove that lie. The transmission showed detailed footage of hegemony ships trapped in Earth's gravitational fields, their weapons useless against human defenses, their mighty armada reduced to impotent observers of humanity's defiance. We are sharing with you the complete technical specifications for gravitational defense systems. This technology can be built with resources available on any industrialized world. We offer it freely to all who would be free. Aboard the hegemony flagship, Admiral Zexthak watched the transmission with growing horror. "Shut it down! Jam their communications!" "We can't, sir," reported Communications Officer Priltex, her scales now a deep purple of panic. "They're using gravitational waves as a carrier signal. To jam it, we'd have to disrupt space-time itself across the entire system." "Then do it, sir. That would require detonating our entire fleet's antimatter reserve simultaneously. It would create a black hole that would consume this entire star system." Admiral Zexthak stood frozen as he realized the trap the humans had laid. They weren't just defending their planet. They were spreading rebellion across the galaxy. And there was nothing the hegemony could do to stop it without committing galactic suicide. The transmission continued for 6 hours, beaming detailed technical data, tactical information, and something far more dangerous, hope. Across the galaxy, enslaved species learned that the hegemony could be fought and defeated. More importantly, they learned exactly how to do it. Within days, reports began flooding into hegemony command centers across the galaxy. Slave worlds were rebelling. Industrial planets were constructing their own gravitational defense systems. Species that had been subjugated for millennia were suddenly declaring independence and daring the hegemony to stop them. "This is a catastrophe," General Vexine declared during an emergency war council. "We have over 300 worlds in open rebellion. Our garrison fleets are reporting that they're facing gravitational weapons on planets that shouldn't even understand the principles involved." War Master Crixtel's crystalline form was dim with despair. The humans have done more than defeat our invasion. They've sparked a galactic revolution. Admiral Zexthak studied the report streaming in from across hegemony space. Entire sectors were declaring independence. Fleet after fleet was being trapped or destroyed by newly constructed gravitational weapons. The carefully maintained order of 10 millennia was collapsing within weeks. "Sir," Commander Veltar said quietly, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony Prime Command." The holographic display activated, showing Supreme Admiral Korthax, the highest military authority in hegemony space. The ancient creature's multiple eyes were focused with laser intensity. "Admiral Zexthak," the Supreme Admiral's voice carried across space with ominous weight, "your mission parameters have changed. You are no longer tasked with conquering Earth. You are tasked with stopping the spread of this rebellion before it reaches the core worlds. Sir, to do that, we would need to completely destroy the human homeworld and eliminate all traces of their technology. Then do so. Use whatever means necessary. If that planet continues to exist, it will serve as a beacon for every rebel movement in the galaxy." "The hegemony cannot survive such inspiration." Admiral Zexthak felt his blood chill. "Sir, the only weapon capable of penetrating their gravitational defenses would be a stellar core torpedo. The explosion would sterilize this entire star system. Acceptable losses. The rebellion must be stopped here or we lose everything." As the transmission ended, Admiral Zexthak stared at Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel surrounded by impossible mathematics made real. The humans had forced the hegemony into an impossible choice: commit genocide on an unprecedented scale, or watch their empire crumble. But the humans weren't finished yet. As Admiral Zexthak prepared to give the order for humanity's extinction, Earth's defenders were about to reveal that they had been holding their most devastating weapon in reserve. The stellar core torpedo was the galactic hegemony's ultimate weapon, a device so destructive that its use had been forbidden for over 8,000 years. It worked by extracting a fragment of neutron star material and accelerating it to near light speed using gravity manipulation technology far beyond anything the humans had displayed. When it detonated, it would create a miniature supernova capable of vaporizing everything within several light minutes. Admiral Zexthak stood before the sealed vault containing the torpedo, his multiple hands trembling as he entered the authorization codes. Around him, the flagship's most senior officers watched in grim silence. They all understood what this moment meant. The hegemony was about to cross a line that would forever change their empire's character. "Sir," Commander Veltar said quietly, "once we deploy this weapon, there will be no hiding what we've done. Every species in the galaxy will know that we're willing to exterminate entire star systems to maintain control. The alternative is worse," Admiral Zexthak replied, though his voice carried no conviction. "If the rebellion spreads to the core worlds, the hegemony will cease to exist entirely." But as the torpedo bay prepared to open, something impossible began to happen. Space around Earth started to fold in on itself, not in the familiar patterns of gravitational lensing they had observed before, but in configurations that made hegemony. Sensors scream warnings about reality itself becoming unstable. "Sir, massive gravitational anomalies are forming around the planet," Tactical Officer Morkston reported, his voice rising with panic. "Whatever they're doing, it's drawing energy from everywhere. Stars, planets, even the quantum vacuum itself." Dr. Sarah Chen stood in Earth's command center, her hands moving across controls that channeled forces that had never been harnessed by any civilization in galactic history. The humans hadn't just learned to manipulate gravity. They had learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time itself. "Initiating cascade resonance," she announced to her team. "Project Lighthouse goes active in 30 seconds. For 4 months, while defending their planet and spreading revolution across the galaxy, the humans had been building something that violated every known law of physics. They had created a device that could turn their entire solar system into a gravitational weapon. The principle was devastatingly simple and utterly insane. By creating a cascade resonance in the space-time around their sun, they could temporarily convert Sol into a massive gravitational transmitter. The energy release would be visible from anywhere in the galaxy, and would create gravitational waves powerful enough to disrupt faster-than-light travel across hundreds of light years. They're going to do what? Admiral Zexthak stared at his science officer in disbelief as preliminary readings came in. Sir, they appear to be attempting to destabilize their own star. The gravitational resonance they're creating will turn their sun into a beacon that will be detectable from anywhere in the galaxy. More concerning, the gravitational waves will make hyperspace travel impossible throughout this entire galactic arm. They're willing to destroy their own star system to trap us here. Sir, I don't think they're destroying it. The resonance pattern suggests they're broadcasting with it. The realization hit Admiral Zexthak like a physical blow. The humans weren't just sending technical specifications to rebel worlds. They were about to turn their own sun into the galaxy's largest transmitter, capable of reaching civilizations in other galaxies entirely. The rebellion wouldn't be limited to their own galaxy anymore. Cancel the torpedo launch, he ordered desperately. All ships, emergency hyperspace retreat maximum distance. Sir, hyperspace is already becoming unstable. We may not be able to reach minimum safe distance before. The sentence was cut off as Sol suddenly blazed with light that hurt to perceive even through the flagship's most advanced filters. The star hadn't gone supernova. It had become something unprecedented. Every gravitational wave detector in the galaxy would be screaming alerts as space-time itself carried humanity's message to the furthest reaches of known space. But the message wasn't just technical data this time. The humans had learned to encode information directly into gravitational waves, turning the very structure of space-time into a medium for communication. They were broadcasting not just the plans for gravitational weapons, but something far more, dangerous to authoritarian regimes everywhere. The idea that freedom was possible. Secretary General Chen's voice echoed across the galaxy, carried by gravity waves that penetrated every form of shielding and reached every inhabited world simultaneously. Citizens of the galaxy and citizens of all galaxies that might hear this message, know that freedom is not a gift that can be granted or taken away by those who claim authority over you. Freedom is a right that exists because you exist. The message was accompanied by complete historical records of human civilization, showing thousands of years of struggle against oppression, countless examples of people choosing to fight impossible odds rather than accept slavery, and most importantly, proof that ordinary citizens could overthrow even the most powerful tyrannies when they decided to act together. Admiral Zexthak watched his tactical displays as nearly half his fleet began requesting permission to surrender. The crews weren't human, but they were members of species that had been conquered by the hegemony generations ago. The gravitational broadcast was reaching them directly, bypassing their officers and command structures entirely. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from over 4,000 ships, Commander Veltar reported, his own voice carrying a strange note that might have been hope. Ship crews are requesting asylum with the human forces. Denied. All ships will maintain position and, Admiral, interrupted Communications Officer Priltex. I'm receiving a personal message for you from the human planet. The main screen activated, showing Secretary General Chen sitting calmly in his command center. Behind him, displays showed the successful revolution taking place across hundreds of worlds as oppressed species followed humanity's example. Admiral Zexthak, Chen said, his voice carrying across space with the weight of inevitability. Your stellar torpedo won't work anymore. We've destabilized space-time sufficiently that any attempt to detonate neutron star material in this system will create a chain reaction that will consume half this galaxy. You're welcome to try, but I suspect your own crews won't allow it. Admiral Zexthak turned to see that his bridge crew was indeed staring at him with expressions ranging from determination to outright defiance. For the first time in hegemony history, an entire fleet was on the verge of mutiny. The humans had done something no military strategist had ever conceived possible. They had turned their enemy's own forces against their commanders, simply by offering them something the hegemony had never provided: hope. The mutiny began aboard the hegemony ship Eternal Dominion, exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after the gravitational broadcast reached peak intensity. Commander Zixtal, a member of the Vorthon species that had been enslaved for 3,000 years, stood before his captain with a weapon in his hand and revolution in his multiple eyes. Captain Morvex, By the authority of the Free People's Liberation Protocol transmitted by the human resistance, I am placing you under arrest for crimes against sapient life, Zixtal declared, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing. Captain Morvex, a true-born hegemony citizen who had never questioned the natural order of galactic society, stared at his subordinate in shock. Commander, you are committing treason against the lawful authority of the galactic hegemony. The hegemony lost its authority the moment it became clear that its power rested solely on fear and the suppression of knowledge, Zixtal replied. The humans have shown us that resistance is not only possible, but inevitable when people understand they have a choice. Similar scenes played out across nearly 5,000 ships of the hegemony armada. Species that had served as willing auxiliaries for generations suddenly remembered that they had once been free peoples with their own cultures, governments, and dreams. The gravitational broadcast hadn't just carried technical information. It had carried the complete philosophical framework of human resistance, along with detailed plans for transitioning from oppression to self-governance. Admiral Zexthak watched his fleet dissolve around him as ship after ship declared independence from hegemony control. His tactical display showed a cascade of defections spreading through the armada like wildfire. Within 6 hours, he commanded fewer than 1,000 loyal vessels out of his original force of nearly 10,000. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the rebel ships, Commander Veltar reported. They're requesting permission to dock with Earth's orbital platforms to begin negotiations for a formal alliance. Admiral Zexthak felt something crack inside his mind. The idea that former hegemony ships would seek alliance with the very primitives they had been sent to conquer was so far beyond his understanding that he simply couldn't process it. Denied. All loyal ships will open fire on any vessel that approaches the human planet. But when he gave the order, only 300 ships responded. The rest of his loyal fleet simply powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender codes. Admiral, Communications Officer Priltek said quietly, I'm also receiving surrender requests from planetary governors across 17 sectors. The gravitational broadcast has reached the core worlds, and civilian populations are beginning to rebel. The full scope of what the humans had accomplished began to dawn on Admiral Zexthak. They hadn't just defended their planet or even sparked a rebellion. They had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy by proving that the hegemony's technological superiority was an illusion. Any species with sufficient industrial capacity could now build gravitational weapons, and the humans had provided exact blueprints to everyone simultaneously. Sir, incoming priority transmission from Hegemony Prime, Tactical Officer Morkston announced. The holographic display showed not Supreme Admiral Korthax, but Emergency Council Chairman Velthos, the civilian leader who only took control during existential crises. The fact that military command had been superseded meant that the hegemony government itself was collapsing. Admiral Zexthak, Chairman Velthos's voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of unquestioned authority, now crumbling into dust. You are hereby ordered to negotiate an immediate ceasefire with the human forces and return to hegemony space with whatever ships remain loyal. The Core Council has voted to begin transition to a federal structure with limited autonomy for member species. Admiral Zexthak stared at the transmission in disbelief. The hegemony, which had ruled the galaxy through absolute authority for longer than some species had possessed written language, was voluntarily dissolving its own power structure rather than face complete destruction. Sir, Chairman Velthos continued, the humans have made it clear that they possess weapons capable of destabilizing entire star systems. They have also demonstrated the ability to turn our own forces against us. The Council has determined that negotiated transition is preferable to galactic civil war. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by superior ideas. Sir, Commander Veltar said carefully, what are your orders? Admiral Zexthak looked around his bridge at officers who had served the hegemony faithfully for decades. Many were from conquered species who had risen through the ranks by demonstrating loyalty to their conquerors. Now they were all staring at him, waiting to see whether he would choose honor or blind obedience. Open a channel to the human planet, he said finally. The main screen activated, showing Secretary General Chen in his command center. The human leader looked tired but unsurprised by the communication. "Admiral," Chen said simply, "I assume you're calling to discuss terms." "The Hegemony Core Council has authorized me to negotiate a ceasefire," Admiral Zexthak replied, his voice carrying centuries of military pride finally bending to reality. "What are your terms?" "Complete withdrawal of all hegemony forces from Sol system, immediate recognition of Earth's independence, and guarantee of safe passage for any ship crew that wishes to defect to human protection," Chen replied without hesitation. "In return, we'll provide technical assistance for the transition to whatever new governmental structure the former hegemony worlds decide to implement." "And if we refuse?" Chen's expression didn't change, but behind him, displays showed the gravitational resonance around Sol, reaching even higher energy levels. "Admiral, we've demonstrated that we can turn our star into a weapon capable of disrupting faster-than-light travel across this entire galactic arm. We've also proven that we can broadcast information that turns your own forces against you. But most importantly, we've shown every oppressed species in the galaxy that the hegemony can be defeated." The human leaned forward slightly. "You're not just fighting Earth anymore, Admiral. You're fighting the idea of freedom itself. And ideas once released are impossible to destroy." Admiral Zexthak looked at his tactical display one final time. Of his original armada of 9,900 ships, fewer than 300 remained under his direct command. The rest had either defected to the human cause or simply declared independence from all authority. The galaxy he had known for his entire life was ending. "I accept your terms," he said quietly. The war was over. The hegemony had been defeated not by force of arms, but by the simple demonstration that freedom was possible, and that ordinary people could choose to be free if they were willing to pay the price. 5 years after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was a very different place. The galactic hegemony had officially dissolved, replaced by the Confederation of Free Worlds, a voluntary association of species that governed themselves according to principles of individual liberty and mutual cooperation. The transition had not been without violence, as some hegemony hardliners attempted to maintain control through force, but their efforts collapsed when their own fleets continued to defect to the growing freedom movement. Admiral Zexthak, now bearing the title of Transition Coordinator, stood in the observation deck of the space station orbiting Earth. The irony was not lost on him that he had gone from commanding the largest invasion fleet in galactic history to helping coordinate peaceful relations between former enemies. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, he could see the remnants of his once mighty armada. Most of the ships had been retrofitted into civilian vessels, cargo haulers, exploration craft, and mobile hospitals that traveled throughout the former hegemony space, providing aid to worlds still recovering from centuries of oppression. A few dozen had been converted into museums, preserving the memory of the old order, so that future generations would understand the price of surrendering freedom for security. Still thinking about what might have been, Dr. Sarah Chen approached from behind, her footsteps quiet on the station's deck plating. The human scientist had been instrumental in developing the gravitational weapons that had made the resistance possible, and she now served as Earth's primary liaison to the scientific exchange programs that were revolutionizing technology across the galaxy. "I find myself wondering what my ancestors would think," Zexthak replied, his mandibles clicking in what humans had learned to recognize as thoughtful contemplation. "For 10,000 years, my species believed that order required absolute authority. The idea that cooperation could be more effective than domination still seems impossible to me, despite all evidence to the contrary." Sarah smiled and moved to stand beside him at the viewport. "Change is hard, especially when it challenges everything you thought you knew about how the universe works. But that's what makes it worthwhile." Through the station's communication system, they could hear reports from across the galaxy. Former slave worlds were sending their first elected representatives to the Confederation Council. New trade agreements were being signed between species that had been enemies for millennia. Most importantly, exploration fleets were being launched to regions of the galaxy that had been forbidden under hegemony rule, carrying crews drawn from dozens of species working together as equals. "The irony," Zexthak mused, "is that we came here to destroy you and instead you saved us." "You saved yourselves," Sarah corrected gently. "We just showed you that it was possible." A priority message chimed through the communication system. and both leaders moved to the nearest terminal. The transmission was from the Andromeda Contact Project, humanity's ambitious attempt to establish communication with the nearest galaxy. For 2 years, they had been using their gravitational broadcast technology to send messages across the intergalactic void. This is Deep Space Monitor Station Horizon. The voice of Commander Lisa Park crackled through the speakers. We have received a response from Andromeda Galaxy. The transmission appears to be from a coalition of free species who overthrew their own galactic empire approximately 50 years ago. They're requesting detailed information about our liberation methodology and offering a mutual assistance pact. Sarah and Zexthak exchanged looks. The implications were staggering. Humanity's rebellion had inspired not just their own galaxy, but potentially civilizations across the entire local galaxy cluster. It seems, Zexthak observed, that your species has started something far larger than even you anticipated. Freedom tends to spread, Sarah replied. It's contagious in the best possible way. The observation deck's main display activated, showing a real-time galactic map that highlighted the current political status of every known system. Green indicated worlds that had joined the Confederation of Free Worlds. Yellow showed systems still transitioning from hegemony rule to self-governance. Red marked the few remaining holdout systems, where former hegemony officials still maintained authoritarian control. The green vastly outnumbered the red. Final. Report from Admiral Zexthak to Confederation. Historical Archives. Zexthak spoke into the recording system. 5 years ago, the galactic hegemony dispatched 9,900 warships to destroy Earth and eliminate the human threat to galactic order. Of those ships, fewer than 300 returned to hegemony space under the original command structure. He paused, collecting his thoughts as he prepared to officially close the book on the old order. The humans defeated us not through superior weapons or tactical brilliance, though they possessed both, but through something we had never encountered before: the absolute refusal to surrender their freedom, regardless of the odds against them. They demonstrated that a single planet of determined people could not only resist the greatest military force in galactic history, but could inspire an entire galaxy to choose liberty over security. Sarah watched as Zexthak struggled to find words for concepts that his language had no terms for. The hegemony fell because we believed that power flowed from authority. The humans taught us that true power flows from the consent of the governed. We thought that peace required submission. They proved that lasting peace requires justice. We assumed that order meant hierarchy. They showed us that the highest order comes from voluntary cooperation between equals. The recording system indicated that the message was being transmitted throughout the galaxy, where it would join the growing archive of testimony from former hegemony officials who were helping to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The humans gave us something more valuable than victory or defeat, Zexthak concluded. They gave us the choice to be better than we were. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. As the transmission ended, both leaders stood in comfortable silence, watching the peaceful traffic patterns around Earth. Ships from hundreds of species moved in orderly formations, carrying trade goods, cultural exchanges, and most importantly, the knowledge that freedom was not only possible, but sustainable when people were willing to work together to protect it. The galaxy had been saved not by the conquest of its greatest military force, but by the transformation of that force into something that had never existed before, a truly free society spanning the stars. The war was over, but the peace that followed was just beginning.